Welcome to the info session about Roseway planning. I'm going to take you through each of the four phases of the planning framework, just talk a little bit about it, and what the framework subscription comes with. So, first of all, just the picture on screen and this second picture, which is the EYLF planning cycle and the national quality standards. So, these are posters that you receive to show how the planning framework is actually linked across all of Quality Area 1 and the ways and the elements of the planning framework that link into the different 5 stages of the planning cycle. So they're good tools to use to help support staff members around introducing it to them or doing training with them. But they're also really good talking tools when you might have visits with the department, for example, or you might want to be explaining to the parents how things, come together. So they're part of the package that comes in the framework. So there are 4 elements to Roseway planning. The first element is around professional growth and development, and this is what we call the research focus. So at the start of each term, as a team, you would decide whether and what you would like your team to dig deeper in critical thinking and reflection around. Might be a particular topic of practice. It might be some new reading that you've done or some professional learning that's happened in the service that you want the educators to think deeper about. But the idea of the research focus is it's not necessarily connected to the children's planning because it's about a professional growth and development tool for educators. All right, so we'll move to part 2. So this is where we really look at the learning environment as a third teacher. And the underpinning premise from the Schools of Reggio Emilia is where Malaguzzi talks about that learning environment as a third teacher because it's an autonomous space where children are able to engage, grow, develop, and learn both alongside in a co-constructive way with educators, but also in an autonomous way because there is a lot of meticulous thought that's been put into how the learning environment is set up, what resources and different languages and learning styles are in there to support the learners in the cohort of the group. So the way that we actually do this in the Roseway planning framework is we use what's called the environment reflection tool. And this looks at the temporal environment and looking at how the routines work. It looks at the play patterns of the cohort of children as a group. And then it looks at the different resources that we might think about doing. So we would do this tool at the start of every term to make sure that our learning environment continuously is reflecting where the group of children are at. Okay, so the third part of the framework is where we look at group planning. And the fourth part of the framework is where we look at individual planning. And they are 2 very separate elements of the framework. So part 3 is where the educators use what we call the educator's journal. And this is where the planning is broken down into what we call emerging play concepts. So this is where it comes, we look at those play patterns. What are we noticing from the group? What's the cohort's trends of play that we're noticing? Imagine you're on a balcony and you're looking over and you're trying to understand and see where different children are playing or groups of children are moving. What are those trends and patterns that you're noticing? And then we transform these into what we call emerging learning possibilities. And so the ELPs are an important part of the group planning because we break this down and we pull it apart and we don't rush this work. So this is very much based around inquiry-based pedagogy. It is about slow pedagogy, taking our time, not planning 1,000 things to do, but actually really honing in and focusing in our intentionality in particular areas to give children that space to be able to really develop and grow together. So the Educator's Journal looks like this. This is the front cover of it. When you sign up for subscription, the very first term, so you get educator journals for all the rooms in the service for the very first term. And I ask that services use the Educator's Journal and get people to do it in handwriting. You can continue to do that after the first term. The journals are $25, and so you can continue to do that and buy them in bulk or whatever. Or you can move it to online if that's what you want to do, or use your own templates. The reason it's really important, though, for educators to do this in the very first term of implementation There is research that shows that when people are actually handwriting over typing, the neurons in the brain are working better and harder, and the learning is cemented. So this really helps educators unlearn whatever they've done before and start to learn the new processes of the educators through the educators journal and that handwriting. So the ways of doing page is what we call the planning page. This is done in advance. This is where we're thinking about our intentionality over. It can be a week or a fortnight to start with, but we're giving our team and ourselves some guide around what we're going to be really focusing in on. Over the week or the fortnight, we then use our ways of thinking page to put together jottings, and these are just simple jottings about what we noticed from the children's play. How did they respond? Were they engaged? Did they work together? How did they work together? That kind of idea. And then parallel to this, we're writing a story at the end of the week or fortnight for our families about the play. You might do that in a floor book, for example, if you're already using floor books or ways to communicate that way. Or you might do a display for families. The idea is, though, we're not doing a daily upload. We are constructing the story of the planning to share with the families with some images, sometimes maybe not always images. It might be done in a floor book. It might be sent out as a PDF, but it's not done every day. So we need to move away from that idea where we've got to provide this sort of update every single day. We can do that through our conversations with families. We want our documentation to be very authentic. We want it to have some structure to it so that parents, when they're reading it, are not getting overwhelmed by what they're reading or how much is going out. We want them to engage. So less is more, and quality is over quantity always. All right, so the last part is this critical reflection work in the journal. So in the educator's journal in weeks 5 to 6, and then again in weeks 10 and 11, we look at and do critical thinking about the last 5 or 6 weeks of actual play and learning. We look at what happened, what we noticed, and what learning we think might have occurred over that 5 to 6 week period. We think about what's challenged us or what happened that we didn't really expect to happen. This is a really great way to identify unconscious biases that we might have. Then we link that work to the early years learning framework principles and practices, as well as theories. It might link beautifully to the Convention of Rights for Children. It might be something that we want to really link into schematic play. But what we're doing is we're trying to really think about what's been happening and how does it help you understand the learning that's occurred. So where's the validation around it from the theory or the research that we might know or understand? And then the last part of that critical thinking is where to from here. And that's not just about the planning for the children, but also my understandings and what did I learn and what adjustments am I going to make in my practice when I'm actually thinking about this work. What did I learn about myself over the last 5 or 6 weeks as a teacher, and how am I actually going to make some adjustments to my practices based on these learnings that I've had? In the Rose Way, when we're looking at the individual child's planning, we don't just focus around the play interests of children. We look really holistically at the child across learning, development, and well-being. And that may entail some of the play things that they like to do, but it is not just constructed around that. So in other planning frameworks, often what I see is the child played with something, and then it's decided that that's their individual learning story. Then there's an evaluation, then there's a follow-up plan for that, and then that becomes their individual planning. In the Rose Way framework, we don't do that at all. We don't look at things in those micro moments. We actually look and we plan for children over a whole term. The 4 parts of the Rose Way planning framework. Part 1 is the professional growth of educators through research and through critical reflection. Part 2 is the environment tool and looking at the environment as a third teacher and documenting reflection work around that. Part 3 is the educator's journal, and this is where we capture the group planning, which also includes the critical thinking and reflection of that. And part 4 is the individual child through the emerging image planning over the terms, the reflection that we do in that, as well as the summative assessments that we do twice a year. And that's the whole Roseway planning framework. So what comes, this is what the online platform looks like. So just to give you a bit of a visual, it comes with little announcements. There's how-to guides, there's videos, there's support materials, there's coaching sessions. So you get 3 online coaching sessions in the first term of implementation with me. There's all the example research focuses. There's a letter to share with your families to help with the transition over. Then there's all the templates that you can download. They're all blank. They're also printable and or editable. Then there's examples of all of the elements of the planning framework that you can download and
create folders for your team if you want to. There's a self-paced training each year that's a different training, and then there is a library of resources and reading.
So that essentially is the framework altogether. It's very, very simple. It's less writing and a whole lot more thinking that educators need to do. But certainly the testimonials of those that have moved into this planning framework is that educators are thinking much more deeply about what they're planning and what they're doing, and also looking at their practices in a much deeper way.